Hello, everyone. Good evening. I know it's a little late, but I had to jump on just to come and have a conversation with you all tonight. So, I'm Sherry Wary, in case you all do not know who I am. Yes, my name rhymes. Yes, is my real name. I have lots of fun with my name, to say the least. And I am the CEO and founder and empowerment strategist of Wary Consultations. And I released on Sunday a ministry guide, a trauma-informed ministry guide for churches. And I wanted to come on and just talk about it a little bit, just to give you all some tips from it. But I want to start off with giving some tips first to those of you all who may have experienced trauma that's related to the church. And so thank you to everyone who, liked and comment on the post that I put out on Sunday. Really do appreciate it. For those of you all who are supporting, as well, I do appreciate that. So I'm very thankful for that. But before I jump into our topic tonight, is that I want to talk about trauma, church hurt, and then healing, right? But before I do that, I want to give you all actually some more information just about who I am, my qualifications, my experience, especially for those of you all who are watching this on Facebook and YouTube, because especially on Facebook, I don't talk a whole lot about what I do professionally. So I want to give a chance just for you all to know that, I do have credentials and experience when it comes to even just the product. And I'm also going to let you all in on some more information related to how you can get additional resources when it comes to even getting trauma informed services for the church and for faith based organizations. So, again, I'm Sherry Wary. And when it comes to just mental health, trauma, being trauma informed, and then also being a faith based person, that is those are topics that I'm very passionate about. I grew up in the church. Like, even before I was born, I was in church. My parents, both my parents are Christians and really believe in God, and think it was important to be able to pass on that faith tradition to, me and my brother. And so, from a very young age, I have memories of being in church, taking communion, being in like youth group and the Sunshine Band, and going to Bible study and Friday night youth service, and going to revivals and jurisdictional meetings and district meetings, and like everything in between. And even traveling, with the youth group, all over the country as well, for just different conferences and things that were available. I grew up just in Black Pentecostal churches. And so I'm very familiar just with the charismatic experience when it comes to, being part of church. And honestly, like, even as a kid, like, going to church is one of my favorite things to do. I had friends there, but even more important than just having friends who are like around my same age, and having connections with adults who I saw as like mentors and family members, I also had just really powerful experiences just with God, even at a very young age. I was actually filled with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit at 7 years old. I was baptized shortly before my 8th birthday, or maybe like it was right after, but it was around that time, right? So I was 7 going on 8 years of age. And, from then, just again, I had very powerful encounters with God just as a child. Now, I'll be honest and say I didn't have the full understanding of everything that was happening, but those moments were definitely pivotal moments, just, like in my life. And so then growing up just as a teenager, again, just enjoyed being in church. Like, I read the Bible without being asked, like just on my own, and was studying and do things. And then when I was about 14 years of age, my Sunday school teacher at the time had me to start teaching my Sunday school class periodically, which I was so nervous about in the moment, because I'm like, what? Because at that point, I was the youngest person in the class. Now, everyone else who was in the class were dear friends of mine, so they were so supportive. And looking back on that in retrospect, I really appreciate that. But what I realized many, many years later is that my Sunday school teacher at the time saw that I had the gift of speaking and teaching. And so even though I didn't fully realize that myself, she saw that. And so she was preparing me for what I would now do as adult. And so now I just want to, before I do that, let me also give you a little bit more information about just my Faith Expansion. So I am a licensed minister. I've been licensed since 2010. And so, I have been very involved in the churches that I was a part of, from, teaching Bible study or Sunday school class, or, something of nature, being part of the youth group. And then, preaching messages, like as well. And so I've had all these experiences from a religious standpoint. And honestly, just my time in church, again, was really preparation for what I would end up doing professionally. So on the professional side, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I have a master's degree in social work, and I'm a licensed social worker. And then I have other certifications as well. Like I have a certificate in trauma-informed care as well. And I've done other trainings and have other certificates. I have a professional development certificate as well. And so I've been in spaces just professionally around multiple therapists, right? And so even one of my closest mentors and friends, she's a licensed therapist. And I've just had the opportunity to be surrounded by people who have really poured into me and equipped me to be able to be ready to be able to show up in a way to take care of people, right? And when I mean say take care of people in a way from a mental and emotional perspective, and to ensure that people get services in a way that honor their dignity and that also doesn't cause just like additional harm in the process. And so on the professional side, like I have worked in different social work positions, for different nonprofits. I have managed workforce development programs. I was a corporate trainer at one point, as well. And so I've done trainings for corporations, nonprofits, educational, even governmental institutions as well. And so I'm currently just in the advocacy world, still doing trainings, trauma-informed trainings is one of the parts of like my current position that I do with the advocacy work, and just doing a lot of just community, just empowerment. So I'm really passionate about helping people and supporting them just on their journey when it comes to getting the information that they need in order to succeed personally, professionally, spiritually, as well, right? And just to be able to live a life of wellness. And so all of this combines then puts me in a position to really then provide the services that I'm going to be talking to you about today. But even bigger than just providing the services is that I'm just really passionate about just these topics, right? This current initiative with the Trauma Informed Ministry Guide, and then just the flagship program, Faith That Heals, which I'll tell you about like at the end. This honestly has been in the work for almost 2 years now. Like this is the idea that I've had for a while. And just now I've taken the time to really put it together and to provide it to you all. So I'm really excited about that, and excited to be able to add to the space just some information that is really needed and the perspective that is really needed. Unfortunately, a lot of times that you will see that then the professional world and frameworks that are there are sometimes pitted against just faith-based principles and like the Bible and things of that nature. And just being the person that operates in both worlds, I see that doesn't have to be the case, right? There are points of symmetry, and there are points to be able to merge the two, right? And, I'll be honest and say there may be some instances where that may not be the best alternative. However, more often than not, it is very possible to be able to do that. And so I really want to just have that conversation about that, and to start that, and just to be part of, again, a much needed conversation that needs to happen around more circles. It's happening in some other spaces, but I would say in the spaces that I'm in on a regular basis, I'm not just really seeing that yet. So I just want to be just part of adding to that conversation and just providing something that's like really needed. So let's get into actually just the tips when it comes to just if you have experienced trauma that is church-based, as far as what you can do to heal. Because honestly, before I even talk about any service or training or consulting that I offer, I want to really deal and talk to the people first, right? And so I want to give just 4 tips that you can do just to be able to heal. So, one, it's really important for you to be honest about what happened. And so, depending on what has occurred and how challenging it's been, and just the impact that it had just on your life in the moment, and then even the aftermath of it, is that it can be hard to be honest about what happened, especially if you encounter people who wanted to then just invalidate what occurred in your life. And wanted to invalidate just the experience and the people that were involved. Is that before you can really heal, you have to be honest about what happened. Now, I'm being honest about yourself, but yet honest about what happened. This is really about being honest with yourself. You may not need to publicly announce that portion of just the details of what happened, or even to talk to anyone else about it. At minimum, I definitely am an advocate for just, talking with a licensed professional, and I'll get to that in just one moment with my second recommendation that you can do, or the second tip. But it is really important to be honest, right? Be honest about who was involved. Be honest about the impact. Be honest about how your expectations were not met and how you had an experience that you did not sign up for, right? And so you want to be honest about what occurred. A lot of times is that it can be hard to be honest about what occurred, because being honest, it opens up the wound again, right? It opens up just those experiences, and you can have, flashbacks, or, you can feel like you're in that same place again where you're being harmed all over again. And so that's why, honestly, I recommend doing that within the safety of working with a licensed professional, because they have the tools and the skill sets to be able to help you to be able to process through that at a pace that keeps you emotionally and mentally and even physically safe, right? And spiritually safe. So definitely advocate for that. So let's actually get into tip number 2, right? Since, that's like a perfect segue for that. And so you want to find a support system of people who are equipped to handle the depth of your pain and the breadth of your healing. You want to get into a network of people who are able to handle the depth of your pain as well as the breadth of your healing. Now, here's why you need someone to do both, because it's easy to find, I won't say easy, but it can be sometimes easier to find someone who can only do one or the other. So if you only find people who can handle the depth of your pain, these are people who are not going to be able to have the capacity or be equipped to help you to move forward. So these are going to be the people who are going to be in your amen corner, so to speak. Say, yeah, that was messed up. They're dirty for doing that. They are so wrong. Like, they're going to help you keep reliving the pain, but like in the sense of just only focusing on it's wrong. Let's talk about the details. Let's look at all the angles and the perspectives. And it's more so like they're constantly just interviewing you about the pain, and that's it, right? And so again, it's important to be honest about what happened to you, but for you to only live in the pain, to only have conversations about what happened, to only have conversations that rehash and look at it from a million different perspectives, is that at some point that's actually going to end up doing more harm than good if you are only having conversations about the pain. And then if you go on the flip side to the other extreme, and you only talk to people who have the capacity to handle the depth of your healing, or to talk about healing, or to be positive, right? Like in some respects, try to put you in a place of toxic positivity, then these are people who are going to invalidate and try to rush you through the process of dealing with your pain. So you don't need someone that only focuses on your pain, but you also don't need someone who only focuses on the healing and is not able to assist you with processing through the pain to get to the point to then be able to talk to a healing. Healing is a journey, right? It's a process. It's a pathway that you have to go down. And so if you rush through any part of the journey, you're going to have to come back and do it all over again. And so this is why it's important to work with licensed professionals, to work with people who have the expertise to be able to handle, again, the depth of your pain as well as the breadth of your healing. So these are people who can work in tandem with both, right? And I want to be honest and say that just because someone is a pastor, an anointed, and a ministry leader does not mean they're equipped to do that. First of all, no one person is supposed to be everything to everyone, right? And this is one of the things I even mentioned in the Trauma Informed Ministry Guide. No one person is an expert in everything. Even I have areas that I'm an expert in. I have areas that I am informed in, but I am not an expert in every single thing. Like, I have people I have to go to for the areas that I'm not an expert in order to get the wisdom and insight and support that I need to be able to handle like whatever the situation is that I'm getting assistance for, right? And so it is important to understand that just being a pastor, whether it's you as a lay member or a church member who is trying to put that pressure on your pastor and say like, oh, well, I should be able to come and get my taxes done by you, have you as my primary care doctor, come to you as my licensed therapist, also get you as my spiritual advisor, and then have you also be my social person too. Like, that's too much. That's way too much, right? And then if you're the pastor in ministry, take off the cape. You are not meant to be Superman, Superwoman, and you're not meant to be the savior for anyone that is under your spiritual care. So take the cape off, take off just trying to be the savior and be Jesus Jr. for people, or to be God, to fill God-sized voids that you were never created to handle. You were never created to fill or to handle God-sized voids. No matter how anointed you are, no matter how deep you are, no matter how much of a relationship that you have with God, and how much you spend in time, worship, and prayer. Like, listen, you definitely need to do that. But again, you're not meant or created to fill God-sized voids. And so you want to then take off that responsibility and lean on other people who have expertise in areas that you don't, right? And to also ease the burnout, because burnout is so real for pastors and for ministries, but that's a whole nother discussion. We'll talk about that another day. Okay. So let's move on to tip number 3. You want to give yourself compassion as you go through the process of healing. Is that you're not going to be perfect. Nobody is perfect just without experiencing trauma, right? And so now if you have experienced traumas, that has put you in a position where you now need even more compassion as you go through this journey. And needing compassion doesn't mean that you're this horrible person, or you're weak, or anything like that. Like, there's a deficit in that, an inherent deficit with you, right? What it means is that you just need additional support because of what you've gone through. Like, we give support to people who experience a heart attack or who break their leg, but then we don't give the same support and compassion to people who experience wounds that we can't see. Like, when you experience mental and emotional and spiritual trauma, you don't have the scars to show people. You don't have the wounds to show people, but the scars and wounds are still there, and they're still very much in need of compassion. So show yourself compassion. And then the 4th thing is that I want to encourage you to trust God again. And this is the last tip, not the first one, because it may not be the first one that you are ready to even have to begin, right? And so I want to encourage you to begin just a little bit in the little things, right? Just to trust God and to be honest about the fact that people hurt you and they did you wrong, but to also know that God is still able to heal. Now, this can be a hard step to actually do, because then you have questions about, why is it that this all-powerful, all-knowing God allowed this to happen to me, right? And I'll be honest with you, I don't have the answers to that, which is why it's a God-sized void and only God can fill it. And that's where faith comes into play. So those are the 4 steps that I encourage for those of you all who have experienced church-based or faith-based trauma. Of course, there's more things to take in consideration in your healing journey. But if no one has told you today, I love you. I'm praying for you and wishing the best for you just with that as you go through your process. And so now I want to go into tips then that is actually in the Trauma Informed Ministry Guide. So I'm going to drop this in the chat so that you all can check that out while I am actually talking about it. So this is a digital guide that you can actually purchase and download. It will be immediately available once you go and purchase it. And so you are welcome to do that. If you have any questions about it, you can DM me or even send the email as well. And my email is sherry@sherrywary.com, or you just go to my website, sherrywary.com, and you can, get all the information. So I will drop that in the chat just in a moment, just so that you all can have that. So first I want to start off with just defining what trauma is. So trauma is defined as any event or experience that overwhelms just your typical ability to be able to cope from something, right? So every experience that we have that is painful or stressful does not automatically qualify as trauma. So I want to name that. Every painful experience or stressful event is not trauma, right? However, when you experience trauma, it can be painful and it can be stressful. But and I also want to, point out that even when it comes to even understanding what trauma is not really based upon the actual event. It's based upon your response to the event. And trauma is not always just one event. Sometimes it's multiple events experienced over a period of time. And just the response to trauma is going to be individualized. Like it's just going to be dependent upon just how resilient you are. It's going to be dependent on just life experiences that you had prior to the trauma. It's going to be dependent on just the support system that you have or may not have. Like there's a lot of different factors that can go into if someone is traumatized. Like you can have multiple people in the same event at the same time. One person may be traumatized, another person may not, right? So again, this is an individual experience. And so once someone has experienced just that type of trauma, or any type of trauma, is that it is important for there to be interventions, like in place to be able to help that person to navigate the process of healing. And so two of the things that happen in church that actually is a hindrance to people actually healing from trauma is first and foremost when we as pastors or ministry leaders minimize or over spiritualize pain, and it is not spirit led. And so I want to give that caveat saying spirit led is that it's important to be led by the Holy Spirit, to be led by God when you are talking to someone, supporting someone who has experienced trauma. But more important than that, or I won't say more important, equally as important to that, is that you need to make sure that you are equipped to handle that. Right. And so if you're not equipped to handle that, you need to pass that person on to someone who is equipped to do that and who has the expertise to be able to do that. And so what it looks like with minimizing or over spiritualizing pain when you are not spirit led is like saying, oh, God won't, just trust God. Right. Like someone pours out their heart to you about a traumatic experience and your response is just trust God. Not how you can support, not how you can help. And to be completely honest, go into the biblical base of it, because this services, the information, the guide, it is biblically based. That is not even in line with what Jesus did. When you look at even the times that Jesus would heal people, he met the human need first before he dealt with the spiritual need, right? And so like with the woman at the well, he talked with her first, right? And then went and through the whole process of like ministering to her. With the woman who was caught in the act of adultery with the man, but the man wasn't brought to be stoned, only the woman, is that he protected her from getting stoned to death first, and then, spoke to her about her having another chance just to live her life differently, right? When you look at even the man who was at the pool of Bethesda, is that Jesus told him, like he talked to him to understand his story first, and then he went and he healed him, right? And there's so many more examples of that. Even with Lazarus, when Lazarus died, is that Jesus cried first. The shortest scripture in the Bible saying that Jesus wept is that Jesus cried first, right? And then he went and he healed them and raised them from the dead. And so when it comes to then us ministering to people who have experienced trauma, who have experienced very deep pain, is that we have to speak to the human need first. You have to speak to the immediate need, right? And so once you speak to the immediate human need, that provides space again to go into the spiritual. And so you don't want to minimize or over spiritualize pain. Another thing that happens, and it's the second tip I provide, is that when there's an overemphasis on obedience and submission. And so ultimately you have a pastor or a ministry leader that is teaching unquestioned submission. Like they're over teaching and overemphasis. You need structure, you need order, but you also need to remember that your members are adults and they deserve to have agency and consent over what their experience is within the church and even outside of the church as well, right? And so when you put an overemphasis over submission, especially unquestioned submission, what you end up doing is actually creating an environment that silences victims and protects abusers. Again, I'm going to read that again. You create an environment that silences victims and protects abusers. In addition to that, you then set people up to be more likely to be abused and traumatized even outside of the church as well, because you're teaching a way of living. You're creating a culture that can get ingrained in an individual and make it more likely for them to operate the same way outside of the church that they operate within the church. And so it's so important to make sure that you get consent and that you don't force people to do things they want to do. Again, that's not even biblical. When you look at the Bible, is that you see even God gives us free will. So if the God of the universe gives us free will, right? If the God of the universe gives us choice to decide if we do something or not, who are you as a human being? Who are we as human beings to try to force people to do something they don't want to do and take away their free will that's God given anyway? That's not okay. And that's how traumatized continues to happen again. That's how people continue to be abused. That's how, again, you create a culture that actually is not healthy or safe for anyone, even you. So these are two of the tips that I dive into in the Trauma Informed Ministry Guide. Again, I did drop the link in the chat so that you can see that there. But want to let you know that this guide is actually just an introductory resource into a bigger resource that is actually available to churches and to faith-based organizations. So the Trauma Informed Ministry Guide for churches is actually part of a new flagship program that I have launched with my business that is titled Faith That Heals. So I would drop that in the chat so that you all can check that out as well. It's titled Faith That Heals. And so this is a whole suite of trainings and consulting services that churches and faith-based organizations can actually connect with me to be able to then implement trauma-informed principles. There's over 30 trainings that are available as part of this 4-phase program. And so I invite you to reach out if you have questions, if you are a pastor or ministry leader, or even a leader of a faith-based organization or nonprofit. I encourage you to reach out if you have questions. We can even schedule a brief call, just to jump on, just to talk more about just what is offered. But it's a 4-phase program that really works with church leadership, with church volunteers, and then lay members, and then equips you to be able to connect with the community to be able to provide trauma-informed services. And so we review just your church policies. We go over just what is your church culture. We go into, providing training for your members to be able to equip them, and your executive leadership staff as well, and any volunteers that you have, to be able to equip them to be able to have the right language, the right tools and resources to be able to support people who have experienced trauma. And so this positions your church to be able to even repair harm that may have been done unintentionally, or maybe there may have been some wrong people that were in place that intentionally harm. But this program, the services and the trainings and the consulting, positions you to be able to move forward in a way that, one, is biblically based, two, models the models of the Lord, of Jesus, right? And then also allows you to be able to honor the dignity and the journey of people as well. And so I'm so excited to be able to offer this resource to you all, excited to be able to, again, be part of a much needed resource that needs to be found, and connecting and just combining just mental health frameworks with, again, ministry and biblical truths as well. And so thank you all for joining. I hope that you have a restful night or a great day, depending on when you see if you're catching this on a replay, what time you're watching this. Again, you're welcome just to comment directly on a video at your on the platform that you are seeing this, or just to message me directly just with questions, or you can even just email me at Sherry at sherrywary.com. That is my email address, or you can just check out my website, which is sherrywary.com. All right, take care. Have a great night. Have a great day. And I will be in touch soon. And if no one has told you today, I love you. I am praying for you. I wish the best for you. And know that whatever pain that you have experienced, that this does not have to be the end of your life. Is that healing is possible. growth is possible, evolving is possible, and living a life of peace and joy despite whatever has happened. It is possible for you. So go after it. Don't stop until you obtain it. And if you need to reach out to a licensed professional, please do that. If you need resources from me, if I'm a good match for you, we can definitely work together. I do offer one-on-one coaching in addition to training and consulting services for businesses and organizations. And so if you have questions about that, you can definitely reach out to me as well. So, all right, take care. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.